if you take Westminster as a borough,
Yep.
has nearly 700 high-rise buildings. Our next closest comparator in the UK is Manchester, Greater Manchester in its entirety, and that has 500. So one borough in London has 200 more high-rises than our next closest comparator.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Black Cat Chat. It's great to be back in the chair for this new season that we've been planning over the last couple of months. We're going to try and do something a little bit different. Today's guest is not part of the Black Cat team. In fact, he's quite impressive. He's one of my definitely most impressive friends that I've had for many years. That's how I've got him in the chair. There's been no other reason to do this, I imagine, other than our 30+ year friendship. But today we are joined by London Fire Commissioner Jonathan Smith, however you are out in the public arena, and it's a bit of a coup to get you to come and sit with us as our audience grows. But hopefully, the crossover of what we do and what is important to you in your role, we can actually get some really interesting stuff for our audience. So, John, welcome. When you do a little intro, tell us a bit about yourself. This is your camera here, and then we'll just get the chat going as we like to.
Well, thanks, Andy, and what a great introduction. So thanks ever so much for that. So I'm Jonathan Smith. I'm the London Fire Commissioner. But as you said, John is absolutely fine. You know, there's no airs and graces here.
Good.
The position itself sounds very glamorous and it sounds very strategic, and in some ways it is.
Yeah.
Because essentially my role is to run the London Fire Brigade, so the fire and rescue service for London, on behalf of the Mayor of London, and most importantly, the people who live and work here and come to visit.
That sounds pretty important.
So it has its responsibilities, as you can well imagine. But you know, I've been in the fire and rescue service for 26 years now. You know, it's what I've done my entire adult life since I left university, and as well as being a job, it's very much a vocation.
Cool.
And I'm now very privileged to sit in the position that I do as head of, you know, the most challenging fire and rescue service in the whole of the UK because of the built environment and the risk profile that London has, which I'm sure we'll get into,
of course,
in the conversation. So, 26-year career in the fire service. I transferred into the London Fire Brigade from a bordering service, so from Hertfordshire Fire and Rescue Service, in the aftermath of the Grenfell Tower fire, with a lot of the improvements that have followed since that tragic event in 2017 really shaping my career. Yeah, certainly over the course of the last 7 to 8 years within the London Fire Brigade, and that's why I'm now in the position that I'm in.
And so you joined London at what rank or what position? Is it rank? I presume it is rank.
It is rank. We are a rank-based organisation, so we're still quite militaristic in terms of the structures that we operate under, because as you can imagine, in a fire scenario or any type of rescue event, command and control is actually very, very important from a health and safety perspective, and from our ability to command a scene of operations, there has to be a proper structure in place.
Yeah.
And a lot of our command structure is drawn from the military, particularly the Royal Navy, actually. So a lot of the heritage that sits within the fire and rescue service is actually drawn from the Navy. So the fact we're watches, we have watch officers, we have officers of the watch, all of this type of thing is actually drawn from the Royal Navy, which in some ways is logical. We think about the Navy is very much about water. We're very much about water. So
you're quite about fire as well.
There is very much about fire. And the Navy actually has got a long tradition of firefighting, because as you can imagine, a fire on a ship is not a good thing. And there's no fire and rescue service to come along and sort it out, so you have to do it yourself. So there's a lot of synergy between the two things. But as a service, London deals with an extraordinarily complicated risk environment, which is actually more complicated now than it was even 20 or 30 years ago when I first joined the fire and rescue service. Because one of the things that we're wrestling with as a sector, but also specifically London Fire Brigade, is how quickly risk was developed over recent years. So when I first joined, the role was always difficult and dangerous, and there were always things that we had to be very aware of, but actually it was quite straightforward in what we were expected to do. Fast forward 20, 30 years, and actually the types of incidents that we have to deal with now are more broader than they ever were when I first joined. The fact that risk evolves so quickly is again something that's very different to where we were sort of 20, 25 years ago. So a couple of examples for you, Andy. If you take wildfire, so dealing with wildfires. So in London, that wasn't really a thing, because as you can imagine, we are predominantly an urban fire and rescue service.
As someone who lives within the M25, it is not something I consider a threat in my
No.
day-to-day life.
And neither did I.
Yeah.
So 5 or 6 years ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation about wildfire. It was a problem in Wales, problem in Scotland, problem in Northumberland, problem in the Peak District. You know, that it was an issue, but here in London it wasn't. But actually, because of the implications around a changing climate, and the fact that we're dealing now very regularly with a hot summer period. You know, back in 2022, we had firefighters operating in 40, 41 degree heat on one day in July. So July the 19th, 2022, which will be forever etched in my mind.
Okay.
We used almost every single one of our fire appliances. We had 15 significant incidents spread right across the geography of London.
And what is, so just beyond that, so the geography of your service, it is the M25, right?
It is. So our operational boundary stretches out to the M25. So obviously that includes central London and outer London, but it also includes parts of the home counties that sit within the M25. We've got some national responsibilities as well. So there's something called national resilience. So if another fire and rescue service in the UK was struggling with a particular incident, they're able to draw down through our national resilience arrangements assets from London to be deployed elsewhere. So the North Yorkshire wildfires last year, we deployed LFB firefighters to go and assist North Yorkshire with the situation that they were in. That's basically how that works. So the operational boundary that we've got stretches out to the M25. That's a population. If you take that as your remit, that's a population of about 10 million people.
Wow. Okay.
That's 10 million people that we know about. So there's probably another million on top of that we know nothing about. Okay. And that's before you then take into account commuters coming into town, tourists, visitors. So the size of the population is actually getting close to 12 million when you start to bring all of that into consideration. Scotland has a population of 5 million.
Right, okay.
So when you look at the operational responsibility that we have as the Fire and Rescue Service for London, it is significant. You know, it's very, very different. Not better, but different than anywhere else in the rest of the UK. And that's something we have to constantly think about.
Yeah. And so you were saying about that high peak in temperature day. And, you know, so the impact of that, you know, now I presume that kind of event happening once is now forever in your planning for the future, right? Because it's not going to get any better in the
No, you're completely right, Andy. So to use that phrase, you know, that it's become the new normal. Yeah. You know, funny enough, I was in a strategy meeting yesterday talking about the run up to the summer period, and we've already written out to all of London's borough chief executives to say, look, you need to think about how you're managing your green spaces, making sure there's signage up, making sure people aren't using disposable barbecues, all of this sort of thing. Yeah. In preparation for what we anticipate to be another very busy summer period. Yeah. So since really 2022, which has become a sort of a line in the sand really in terms of how we were challenged as a fire and rescue service, we have seen consecutively now busy summer periods. So between June and really the end of September, we're dealing with almost every year a record number of wildfire and grass fire type incidents, which we just simply weren't dealing with that 10 or 15 years ago. Yeah. You then overlay things like the impact of modern technology. So lithium-ion batteries is a big thing now. So e-bike fires, e-scooter fires. So in 2020, we went to 20 e-bike, e-scooter fires. Okay. Last year, we did a record number of e-bike and e-scooter fires. And we did over 200. And we've seen fatalities as a result of failing charging devices, you know, conversion kits, things that are ordered online that are not properly regulated, a whole range of things and challenges there. And if you think about your own domestic setting, how many lithium-ion batteries do you have in your home? It's even on your person. Yeah. It was described brilliant to me the other day, actually, where someone said, well, lithium-ion batteries are now the new chip pan. So they've become the big challenge for us as an organisation. And a sector is how do we manage the impact of new and emerging technology, which does have these risks associated with fire in particular. Yeah. But of course, we need to embrace the technology because going back to my wildfire conversation, how are we going to deal with a changing climate? It's through modern technology and clean forms of energy. So all of these sorts of things we're having to think about at the moment in a way that we weren't 5, 10, 15 years ago. Yeah. And this is all happening really quickly. That's before you start looking at a built environment like a city like London. So London, by every metric, is what's referred to as a global city. You know, and there are only really a few comparators to London internationally. So really, you have to look at Paris, you have to look at Tokyo, you have to look at New York. You know, they are really our comparators in terms of the built environment that we operate in. But even when you look at somewhere like Paris, Paris has nowhere near the high-rise density that London has because of French planning regulations and rules. Really, once you take the Eiffel Tower out of the equation, next time you go to Paris, it's worth having how many really tall buildings do you see in Paris?
I mean,
Not
having
many.
been there, the Eiffel Tower is staggeringly big, and it really does make everything else look incredibly small. And the fact that you've highlighted that is just
it's just not built up in the way that London. You know, London is on schedule to be one of the most high-rise cities in the world.
You mentioned this when we spoke recently, and I found that really interesting to see because I've been to a few other global cities, and they're doing it, but crikey, London is really going.
You know, we're building at height, you know, and for obvious reasons, because, you know, land is at a premium. There's really only one direction to go, and that's up. We know that we have to try and protect, you know, the green belt and green spaces as much as we possibly can. So the outward expansion of London is always challenging in that context. But we also know we need to be building more accommodation. We need to have more housing. We need to see investment in businesses. And so really the only way is up. And it's about making sure that as the Fire and Rescue Service for London, you know, we're fully plugged in, you know, working with the public and private sector, that building safety and fire safety in how we are changing the urban environment that we're operating in is at the core of everything that we do. You know, that golden thread that's often referred to, you know, right from planning all the way through to occupation and handover, we're thinking about fire safety, we're thinking about building safety, as well as obviously the demand that there is for continuing to build for reasons which we completely understand. People need places to live, people need places to work, we want to see investment in the economy, we want to see all that happen, we want to see growth. But we also have to make sure that safety is not compromised in that rush to build. And that's why having these conversations with the sector and the industry more broadly is really, really important, because we have to have that culture of safety running through everything that we do.
Yeah. And I think the reason that, you know, I really wanted to sit down with you personally, and in this kind of 6-year-old in the room, which is my phrase of trying to learn about things and ask to what seem like sometimes slightly silly questions, perhaps, is like, well, we were going to meet up to go and grab something to eat, and I saw this enormous fire engine stacked with ladders, and I'm looking at it going, okay, that's not going to get anywhere near some of this high, you know, especially the city of London now, with the ridiculousness of, you once 20 years ago had some beautiful buildings like the Gherkin, my personal favourite.
Now
you can't bloody see the thing. You can't see the thing now. It's all hidden by these other monstrosities. But you know, we within our industry, we're seeing the planning permission, we're seeing the buzz and the excitement of this growth in London, and the residential, which, you know, Black Cat we don't do a huge amount with, but you see it. You get a train into any major city now, predominantly London, coming in from Hertfordshire, where I come in, these places like Wembley, you know, it's vertical growth, like you say. And that, to me, as a complete layman, just looks so challenging if you don't do it right the first time round, if you don't do everything in the regulations. So how are you coping with as a sector with that kind of real change and the future planning? Where's that?
Well, it's a great question, Andy. So really, this is where Grenfell Tower as a tragedy has been a line in the sand, in terms of how we look at high risk buildings, how we look at buildings at height, particularly those with domestic accommodation in them as well. And it has been genuinely one of those seismic moments that's seen a shift right across how both fire and rescue services operate within that environment, but also across the public and private sector in terms of how we manage high-rise buildings and high-risk buildings, particularly those with domestic accommodation as well. There's been a sweep of changes to legislation in the aftermath of Grenfell for obvious reasons, you know, changes to key fire safety legislation, the introduction of the Building Safety Act back in 2022, the introduction of the Building Safety Regulator as an enforcing agency as well, and a regulatory agency. So there's been a huge shift in terms of what regulation looks like. But the big thing for me is always about the culture. And it's the culture of the sector, the construction sector, the building sector, fire and rescue services, about, again, going back to what I was saying before, that we're thinking about building safety and fire safety in everything that we do, as both the fire and rescue service, but of course, as the private sector, predominantly the ones responsible for the development that we now see. Now, as a fire and rescue service, are we having to think very carefully about how we deal with ultra high rise? Because that's essentially what we're talking about now. We're talking really about,
what's that floor count?
Realistically, anything above 30 floors would fall into what we would refer to as ultra high rise buildings. And how do you firefight in an operation like that? Because you're right, we've got a 64 metre turntable ladder, which would have been the vehicle that you're referencing.
There you go. Yeah,
And that's the highest in Europe. You know, that we've got 3 of those.
Yeah.
And as the name suggests, it goes 64 meters vertically. But these buildings go way beyond that.
well, Shard's around the corner from here.
Completely. So over, I think, 72 floors, the Shard has got. So firefighting externally has a role in terms of what those vehicles can provide, but actually you fight those fires internally.
Okay.
And this is why the building has to behave in the way that we would expect it to behave as a fire and rescue service.
Yeah.
What Grenfell demonstrated in its horrifying set of circumstances is that buildings now don't always behave in the way that we would expect them to, because of a lack of fire safety mitigation in place. You know, if there's gaps in compartmentalisation, if there aren't proper escape routes, a whole range of things, actually means we now train for buildings not behaving in the way that we would expect them to.
Excellent.
You know, that is actually really something that's fundamental to what we do now on a day-to-day basis, that our firefighters, yes, we should expect a building to behave in a certain way if the fire safety mitigations are in place in the way that we would expect them to. But in a post-Grenfell world, we are now also prepared that if it doesn't behave in the way that we would expect, we're then able to respond and change our tactical plan accordingly.
Yeah.
And you just have to keep practicing it. You have to be familiar with the environment that you're operating in. We take a very, very localized approach to risk. So one of the things that makes London the phenomenal place that it is that effectively what you've got is 33 towns bumped up next to each other.
Yeah.
And actually the challenges that you face in Barnet are a world away from the challenges you face in Tower Hamlets, which are a world away from the challenges you face in Sutton.
Yeah.
And so we have these borough risk management plans, which means local crews and local borough commanders have got a really good understanding around what their local risk picture looks like, as well as what the broader picture looks like across the whole of London.
Yeah.
But dealing with a changing and evolving built environment is something that is it's the real focus of our training operation at the moment, because it's not only at height, because you've also got a subterranean environment, which is unlike anywhere else in the whole of the UK. And that's before you talk about what's on surface level.
Yeah.
We've got a transport network, which is significant when you look at the rest of the UK and indeed the rest of Europe. Over 20,000 heritage buildings within the M25, which again is something we have to be aware of. Over 70% of the building stock, which sits under the remit of the building safety regulator, sits within the M25. So these are high-rise, high-risk buildings we have responsibility for. If you take Westminster as a borough, has nearly 700 high-rise buildings. Our next closest comparator in the UK is Manchester, Greater Manchester in its entirety, and that has 500. So one borough in London has 200 more high-rises than our next closest comparator in the UK that we have to deal with and we have to manage. So it's an urban scale unlike anywhere else in the UK, which is why when we talk about comparing London Fire Brigade to other fire and rescue services, you have to look at places like New York, like Paris, like Tokyo, like Dubai, like Beijing, you know, these big global cities. That's our comparator. And we have to make sure the fire and rescue service here is able to deal with the risks and challenges that London will continue to throw at us over the course of the next sort of 5 to 10 to 15 years, which is a real challenge now because risk just evolves so quickly, you know, and the e-bike, e-scooter fires, wildfires is a good example of how quickly that shift has happened.
That's amazing. So as you're talking about the scale and saying it's 33 kind of towns.
So you've got the 32 London boroughs and then the city of the city of London, which is its own entity.
So what, in terms of the team, the broader team, give us an idea of the scale of this operation.
So we employ nearly 6,000 people across the whole of the London Fire Brigade, so the biggest fire rescue service in England and Wales by some distance. We've got 103 fire stations. 144 pumping appliances, you know, well over 120 specialist vehicles that we've also got and available to be deployed. And that basically breaks down to about 4,500 operational firefighters who are based on stations. You've then got another sort of 200 officers who sit above that, so station commander and above, who form part of that command chain. Then you've got our command and control function down at the London Operations Centre, which is down at Merton, which is where the calls come into the London Fire Brigade and then our resources are deployed from. We've got about 112 control officers who are down there. And then we've got our professional teams, you know, our procurement team, finance team, property, you know, the corporate functions that also sit within the organisation. So it is a fire and rescue service that operates at scale. But one of the things I always point out to people is we're very good value for money.
Yep.
So if I look at my opposite number in New York, for example, so the fire commissioner in New York has got somewhere in the region of 11,000 firefighters to call upon.
Okay.
And as I say, we've got total 6,000, but in terms of operational firefighters, it's about 4,500. My opposite number in Paris has got 8,000.
Right,
In
okay.
Tokyo, they can call upon 16,000. Now there are slightly different operating models, so it's not always a like-for-like comparison.
course.
But if you take New York as a good example, that is very comparable to London, both in terms of operating at height, the built environment, the population size, the nature of risk. And so actually, although I'm not necessarily saying we need a significant increase in resource, although I would never turn that down.
Of course, yeah.
We are certainly operating.
I doubt this is probably the podcast to actually apply for that.
No, but we are certainly operating, on the limits. And actually, we're very, very good value when you look at the risk profile that we've got and the size of the organisation to deal with it. So those are the big sort of challenges that we face as an organisation moving forward. So it's not dull, Andy. That's for sure.
Like I mentioned at the beginning, we go back a long way, went to school together, and I've kind of tracked your career throughout, in a very proud way, and then as you got further in the career, the occasional TV things, and like all of our mates are like, John's on the telly, and things like that.
Yeah, but, usually when something's not very badly wrong.
Heathrow was the last one where we saw you.
It was,
when there was that there, and you were thrown under the bus and thrown out to explain what was
going on.
Well,
Heathrow's a very good example, actually, of the unique challenges that London faces. So there, in one way, what you've got there is actually quite a straightforward fire. So you've got a fire in an electrical substation. Now that in itself has some technical complication because of the nature of what's on fire. But actually, as a fire and rescue service, are we able to bring that under control and deal with it? Yes, we are. But the implications of what happened as a result of that substation fire were enormous, because effectively what that then did was close down the second busiest airport in the whole of the world. And the challenge that presents to the economy.
Everyone's really cool about that, right? When an airport's closed,
there was no problem. It was all fine. It was all.
Yeah.
And so hence the reason, actually, when I was rolled out to do the press, is that the fire itself was actually a small part of what the problem was. The problem was the knock-on impact that it has. And when you're operating in a genuinely global city like London, it's what can, in one way, actually be a relatively straightforward incident to deal with, has ripples that spread far beyond the city itself. And that's really the big differential between running the London Fire Brigade and running another fire and rescue service. You just do not have those national and international ripples in the way that you do here. No, that's crazy. So, like I say, just incredibly proud to be a friend of yours and to listen to just the amount of responsibility weighing on your shoulder. I mean, I've got a team of 4, including myself, and I'm doing pretty well. I think it's all right, But yeah, so in terms of yourself and something we kind of touched on, I said my favourite building is the Gherkin in London. Have you got a favourite building, and whether or not you look at it professionally, and do you have a busman's holiday, right? Whenever you go and look at a building, are you looking, it's beautiful, but no, that's not quite safe, Well, the great thing about, if you take London as an example, and funny enough, we were doing a strategy. We had a bit of an away day yesterday, where I took away the director's team, and we went to the British Museum, actually. So because what we try to do every month is try and go to another location, another venue, and actually just talk about strategy, have the opportunity to talk about what keeps us up at night, just to thrash all of that out.
Good management, John. Carry on.
Yeah, it is good. It is good. I'd actually benefit from it massively. It's amazing, actually, just taking yourself out of the environment that you're normally working in to go somewhere else. And because of who we are, actually, we tend to get it for free and all the rest of it.
Oh, you'd hope so.
It's not always a given, Andy, I can assure you. So yesterday we were in the British Museum, and we had really lucky. We got there early and were able to look round. And actually, that's one of the great things about operating in London is the architecture that exists here and just the sheer variety. So as I say, you've got over 20,000 heritage buildings. But you've also got cutting edge modern technology being developed now in terms of what modern methods of construction look like, which also comes with its challenge. But buildings that are going up all of the time now, you look at them, you're just in complete awe of them. In terms of, and then you look at what's in the city of London as well. You've got places like Mansion House, which is, I don't know if you've ever had a chance to go in there, but the phenomenal what you've actually got there. the Guildhall, these really, really important heritage buildings that exist within
I've
London.
been fortunate to see behind the closed doors
are
of a
just
few of
phenomenal.
those, yeah.
But if you're asking me about what my favourite building is, well, funny enough, at the moment, it's 8 Albert Embankment, which will not be familiar to everybody, but essentially that's where the LFB headquarters once was. So in 1937, I think it was, George V opened Lambeth, and it was an operational fire station, but it was also the headquarters for the London Fire Brigade.
Yes.
And the heritage that sits within that site is phenomenal. So there's a memorial hall that's ingrained within the structure of that building that actually memorialises firefighters who've been killed over the course of the last 150 years. And it's a very, very special place.
Yeah.
There's a bunker there where Winston Churchill used to talk to the auxiliary fire service during the Second World War when the Blitz was on. So as buildings go, the heritage that sits around that site is phenomenal. Now, the reason I'm saying it's now my favourite building is because we're going back.
I've teed you up for an awesome segue here. This is working nice.
So we're going back to 8 Albert Embankment as our headquarters building.
Yep.
And it's a huge construction project, multi-million-pound construction project, which means we're going to move out of our current home in Union Street, where we've been since 2007. And we're going to go back to Lambeth. There's going to be a new fire station, a new headquarters building, a conferencing and exhibition space. One of the other things I'm really excited about is the museum is going to go there as well.
Okay.
Because as you could imagine, the London Fire Brigade has a very, very rich history.
Yeah.
We're actually in the DNA of the city in a way that other fire and rescue services aren't. Going back to the Great Fire of London.
I was going to ask if there were,
or indeed the Blitz, or the Blitz, or the challenges that London faced during the IRA bombing campaign, and of course the security challenges that we face now, as well as all the other risks that we've talked about before.
Yeah.
The LFB is in the DNA of this city.
It's in the DNA of me. My grandfather was part of the firefighting during the Second World War.
I did not.
Before he was a sergeant major in the army, but
I did not know that. So to now go back, and if you look at the plan, you can go on our external website and you can see the plans for 8 Albert Embankment. Because it's a listed building for obvious reasons, it means the facade itself won't change. But we're going to combine the rich history that comes with that building and everything that it stands for with a new, modern, forward-thinking headquarters building for a fire and rescue service that's now got to deal with the next set of challenges that the next part of the 21st century is going to throw at us. Yeah. So that's now very much my favourite building, and it's going to be it's something I'm going to have to concentrate on over the next few years because we've got to get it right. We've got to build it correctly. We've got to get the construction right. It's got to be done in the right way to then really have a brand new fire station, a fantastic headquarters building, and able to display the history of the LFB in the right way in a building that's literally opposite from the Palace of Westminster. So right in the centre of the heart of government within the UK. What a great place to be.
Yeah. I mean, that's incredible. I'm glad I teed you up for that one, without even knowing. So, John, I mean, it's been amazing having you in. I know that you can talk all day about this, but I've only got you for a set amount of time.
No, it's
so and I'd love to say thank you so much for coming in. It's been an absolute delight. And hopefully, maybe in the future, we can invite you back in and talk about this building that you're working on now, which would be amazing. And so, thank you very much, John.
No, my pleasure, Andy. And a really real privilege to be able to sit and speak to yourself and talk to everyone who's going to watch this podcast, because the key thing for us as an organisation in a post-Grenfell world is that our ability to engage with the public and private sector in terms of building safety, how we all work together, to build the homes, to build the private sector buildings that we need to in order to make sure the country flourishes, is done in the right way, which also has fire safety and building safety running through its core. And that very much is the opportunity to do this in this type of forum is why I'm always keen to do it, Andy. So grateful for the opportunity.
That's brilliant. Thank you, John. And thank you for everyone out there for joining us. We look forward to welcoming you back next time.